We fought 2 world wars over borders. World War I, where 30 million people died. World War II, where 50 million people died. It wasn't the only issue, but it was a major issue of those 2 wars. Either we respect each other's borders or we don't. And if we don't, the consequences are severe. World War were the consequences. And at the end of World War II, we finally said, the parties who, the countries that concluded World War II said, look, we're setting up the United Nations to prevent any further aggression of this nature from taking place. And the agreement was reached, and I cited in my article as one of the articles of the United Nations, that you cannot use military power to take border, land from a neighboring state. Like, we respect each other's sovereignty and independence. And so they set up an international rules-based order that has basically patrolled and regulated our affairs for the last 80 years in Western Europe and North America, South America, etc. By and large, that has held. And NATO was formed in order to protect Europe and the United States and Canada from a potential invasion from the Soviet Union and later Russia, to the point where, following World War II, towards the end of World War II, Berlin broke out as a big issue. Germany had fallen apart, and the Allied forces had divided Germany, but Berlin was in Eastern Germany, under Eastern European, that is to say, Eastern German Soviet occupation, but was supposed to be jointly administered between the United States, Great Britain, France, and Russia. And there was a heightened state of concern about how Berlin is to be handled. And in the discussions and in the history there, it became clear that the Western allies were concerned that the Soviet Union's plan was to dominate all of Europe, to militarily and in some way gain a foothold and a superiority over all of Europe, not just Berlin, not just East Germany, but all of Europe. And they had to fight tooth and nail to keep things in order, and ultimately, somehow they resolved the Berlin crisis, which led to this sort of peaceful, long period of time, 80 years, where there were no major incidents related to border clashes until Putin invaded Ukraine in 2014 when he took over Crimea, which was 12 years ago. And that simmering conflict continued until February 2022, when Putin went all in the invasion of Ukraine. So in that hemisphere, the rule of law is no longer respected, at least from the point of view of Russia, that feels, well, we could just march in and take over. And in the Western hemisphere, we're seeing almost the identical thing, where the United States has decided, well, we're going to just step into Venezuela and take it over. Not just extricate a criminal, quote unquote, because of narco trafficking and so on, and prosecute that criminal in a U.S. court. But more than that, we're going to do a regime change, like in Ukraine, where Putin is saying, we're going to change. We don't want Zelensky. He needs to be replaced by someone else. Regime change. So we got this regime change in Ukraine, in Europe, and regime change in Venezuela.